Good morning, my name is Adam Adamek and I'm a representative from technology partner of Greenfield Project, the company Tauron from Poland. On this lecture I would like to tell you more information about adaptation to the climate change in urban area and transport. I think it's important because urban area and transport are something from our daily life. It's easy to understand and it would help you to understand what is adaptation to climate change in practice. And it's good introduction to next lecture about adaptation in energy sector. So right now let's talk a little bit more about adaptation to climate change in urban area, because urban area would be the first sector that we would talk about. So here is first example: green roofs and green walls. The first of the activities regarding urban space are green walls and green roofs. The action is a good example of adaptation to climate change because it allows to lower the air temperature locally and also absorb water from rainfall. It's worth to notice that green surfaces also help to capture some of the pollution from the air. So, so we could tell that it helps to make air quality better. In addition, green roofs and green walls are really aesthetic attractivity and is usually well received by the public opinion. It is worth remember that a single roof will not adapt the city to climate change. In this case, a larger scale is needed. And here on the slide you can see few examples from Poland. First one is International Congress Center in Katowice and its green roof. Another one is roof of the University of Warsaw Library. It's one of the most popular and most famous example of green roof in Poland, and it's really interesting, and visual aspect of this green roof is really great. And the last one is a green wall in the city center in Katowice. So here you have three examples of green roofs and green walls in Poland. And as I said, this might be considered as adaptation to climate change because it helps to lower air temperature, absorb water from rainfall, and also capture some of pollutant from the air. What is more important in green roofs and green walls? We can already find some such solution in the world. Sometimes the need to build a green roof is enforced by law. And it's a really interesting topic because some of European Union countries have unchanged law requiring new commercial buildings to have roofs covered by green surfaces or solar panels. And here are two examples. First one is Basel in Switzerland. It's the city that has the largest green roofs area in the world in relation to the number of inhabitants. By updating the construction law, it was decided that all new and renovated roofs should be green. And here you have some picture from Google Maps. It's a picture from Basel, and you could see how many green roofs you can find here. It's really a lot of, and it's really good example of city that is few steps further. It's not one green roof in the city. It's most. It's many green roofs. So here it's a huge scale, and we could say that this city is trying to be adapted to the climate change. Another example is Copenhagen. It was decided then since 2010 all newly built or modernized buildings with a flat roof should be planted. So here are examples how law could help to adapt the city to climate change. And I think this would be a direction of changes in all European countries in the future. Another interesting example is water retention, and its example from Rotterdam. Rotterdam is the city below the sea level. Therefore, it has big problems with flooding by seawater. As a result, the city decided to take some adaptation activities. An example is a water square, which is a playground and also a water reservoir during rainfall. In addition to the tank, there is a gutter system that drains water directly into the tank during rain. And you can see this water square on the picture. This picture is also from Google Maps, so you could see it by yourself. What more is important, in Rotterdam, an officer responsible for adapting the city to climate change was also appointed. So there is one officer in local authorities which is responsible for adapting the city to climate change. And it's also really good idea, and I think really interesting idea, how adaptation to climate change could be seen in our daily life. Here I have some other examples. On this slide we have another one example from Rotterdam. In the photo on the right you can see a pilot floating cafe. The solution seems quite simple, but at the same time it is really interesting. And this cafe is on the water, and the sea level is not important for them. You can also see here a few plants also on the water. So it's interesting. It's also adaptation to climate change, and I think it could be some attraction for people. But on the other picture on the left side, you can see one of the world's most famous examples of adaptation to climate change. It's raising streets in Miami. Miami in the USA has a big problem with flooding across the ocean. It was decided to raise the streets of the coast about 50 centimeters, which should be enough until 2050. Then it will be necessary to raise the streets again if nothing changes at the rate of climate change. And as I said, it's the one of the most famous example in the world, and probably you could Google some more information about it if you are interested in this topic, which I highly recommend you. Next sector is a transport. So I will present several solutions. Of course, you can find some more examples on adaptation to climate change in transport, but I would show you just a few of them. The first one is bike sharing system. It could be easily found in all larger cities in whole Europe. The action obviously contributes directly to the reduction of pollutant emission from car engines into the air. So it helps us to make air quality better, and it could be seen as an adaptation to climate change. Here you have one picture from Katowice. It's a bike rental station near the train station. And another example is bike sharing system in Wrocław in 2017. So I think it's nothing more to say. It's quite easy to observe in all largest city in Europe, and you can see that bike sharing system might be also adaptation to climate change. Another example is e-mobility and car sharing. Of course, not all cars need to be associated with emissions of large amounts of pollution into the air. Electric cars, which are often used in car sharing system, could be a solution. An electric car using energy from renewable energy sources can be considered almost zero emission if, of course, bypassing the emission associated with the construction of this car or their disposal. Car sharing systems are not as widespread as bike sharing, but they are increasingly appearing in biggest city in Europe. On this slide is an example of an electric car charging station network that Tauron built in Katowice to develop local car sharing. And because this car could be zero emission, is a good example of adaptation to climate change because it helps us to make air quality better, and it helps us to fight with a smog that sometimes is easy to see in biggest cities. Another example that might be interesting is green bus shelters. The solution that works like green roofs or green bus stops. The green shed will also absorb of the pollution from the air and help retain some water during precipitation. The solution can be effective in combination with a large amount of other green infrastructure in the city. This is an example showing that this type of solution that could be used on structures with different surfaces and for different applications. They do not have to be only buildings. This picture shows two examples of such solution from Poland. So green bus shelter in Białystok and another one, green bus shelter in some smaller city in Poland. But it's example really similar to green roofs on a building, but it's really interesting. I think it could show you how how creatively how creative it could be. You can create green roofs or green walls almost everywhere, but you need to be creative. And I have one more interesting example. Of course, it's the same idea, it's the same trend, but it's a little bit more creative. It's green roofs on transport. Here is an example of a green bus and also green boat. And another time it helps us to absorb some water during rainfall or create a little bit better air quality. And another time it's just the same solution but on different type of object. It's not building, it's not shelter. This time it's bus and boat. So something that is moving but still could be green. And that's all. in topic of adaptation to climate change in urban space and transport. Of course, you could find much more interesting examples on the internet, and I hope that the lecture was interesting for you. Thanks for your attention.